Until they bring the streetcars back, chapter 28. When my mother shook me, I leapt out of bed ready to run and almost hit the ceiling. I forgot to set my alarm, and it felt like I hadn't even been to bed. And now I was late, and my shoulder ached where I'd bashed it on the streetcar. I had to concentrate. What day was it, and what would be expected of me? At the breakfast table, Peggy put her ear to her cereal bowl, nearly dipping a pigtail in the cream. Yep, they're all here. Halfway through my Rice Krispies, I didn't give a hoot if Snap, Crackle, and Pop were there or not. I knew banana was. Geez, at breakfast, my mother sliced bananas on anything that wasn't moving. And I knew that someday I'd go to pick up my books or tennis shoes and they'd be covered with sliced bananas. At school, I felt safe, protected by all the kids, but I had trouble staying awake in class. Little Jacob's gasping face kept showing up in my head like a bad dream. Lola yacked about usual things, as if the world weren't a place where murdered babies got stuffed in freezers and you weren't chased by madmen with carving knives. I watched for Gretchen all day, but she never showed. Geez, what was she going through? I wanted to call Sergeant Riley, but I had no idea what I could tell him. I found a dead baby in this guy's freezer, and he chased me all over Tangletown with a butcher knife. Where's the baby now? I don't know. I fumbled it, and when I jumped onto this cow catcher. Cripes, Riley would hang up on me. If Gretchen were a dog, the human in society would take her away and protect her. But for kids who were treated worse than dogs, they didn't have a lousy thing. I hitched for home after school and I asked my mother to wake me for supper. Then I buried myself in my bed and slept like a log. It was hard to come around when she called me, and it seemed I'd been sleeping for about 12 seconds. We were playing the best team in the city, and I felt numb, like my blood had turned to oatmeal. Bobby Overby was running on the stairs again, Peggy said as we ate around the dining room table. You take care of yourself, my mother said. Do you think you could come to the game? I said to my mother like Dad wasn't in the room. Well, maybe we could if your father has some time to rest after supper. What time does the game start? 8:15, my dad said, and I just about swallowed my fork. I didn't think he even knew there was a game. We all kept eating and no one said anything more about it. Hamlin's field house was standing room only, and Monroe only had to beat us to be the champs. It would make up for a lot of our crummy season if we could them off. And once the game started, I forgot everything else and became a maniac out there. So did Jerry G's. I'd never been in a game like that where we fought over every inch of the floor from start to finish. A stocky kid guarding me started lipping off, said he was going to pound me after the game, and he probably could have, but I almost laughed. He should have seen the guy who was after me the night before. We played like they'd hang us if we lost, and our swarming zone defense rattled Monroe. With seconds to go, we were hanging on to a 1 point lead, scrambling on defense, and everyone in the building was standing. A Monroe guard tossed up a frantic shot that banked off the backboard, hit the rim, and bounced off. We had a 10-man scrimmage going for a loose ball. Jerry had it for a second, but a Monroe kid slapped it away, and then Scott snatched it in his big hands and held it above his head as the buzzer blasted over the racket. Central kids swarmed onto the court like we'd won the city championship, shouting and hugging, and I was carried along with the mob, and someone was trying to rip the jersey off my back. Cal, Cal, I heard in the uproar, and I managed to turn and look down. Peggy was hanging on with both hands like she was being left behind on a sinking ship. I stood my ground and wrapped my arm around her and shouted above the pandemonium. What are you doing here? Is Dad here? No, I came by myself. You won't tell on me, will you? We were getting mangled, and I looked at my sister, and I got all choked up, and it wasn't because we'd beaten Monroe. Of course I won't, I yelled. Where do you think they are? Where do they think you are? Staying overnight with Anita. You were wonderful, Cal. You were the one you are the one who's wonderful. I hoisted her onto my shoulders and we whooped and shouted with the happy fans. It ended our season on a sensational note, beating the arrogant Monroe jerks who had acted like all they had to do was show up. Steve and Jean let Peggy sit between them, and he taught her how to shift when the four of us gave her a ride to her friend's house. I wouldn't let her take the streetcar alone, and she became the big cheese in the crowded Chevy. Remember, don't tell anyone I was there, Peggy said as we pulled up to the front door of the house. Don't worry, Steve said. None of us will ever squeal. How about Anita's parents? I said from the back seat. They're out. Why didn't she come with you? She was afraid to. Peggy puffed up like a winter sparrow when Steve said he'd walk her to the door, and I wanted to punch him on the shoulder. I can't wait for that kid to grow up, Steve said as he got in and drove off. Jean laughed. She's already too grown up for you. Being with Lola made me feel like everything would turn out okay, and I was so tired it felt like a dream. Steve drove around and I cuddled with Lola, but I couldn't get Gretchen off my mind. I prayed she'd survive my stupidity, and I wanted to tell my friends about the terrible stuff that was going on in our neighborhood, but I knew I never could.